Santa Cruz might be the most California place in California, not because it's glamorous, not because celebrities live there, but because nowhere else captures this strange California contradiction so perfectly.
On the same day, within maybe 30 minutes, you can stand silently beneath 1,500-year-old redwood trees and then immediately eat a deep-fried Oreo while teenagers scream on a roller coaster next to the ocean. And somehow, both experiences feel deeply American.
Today, I want to talk about why Santa Cruz feels less like a beach town
and more like a living personality disorder of California culture, because once you notice it, you can't unsee it.
Santa Cruz feels like a place where everyone says they rejected capitalism, but somehow the hoodie still costs, $80?
It's a town built on contradictions. People here want freedom, but also property value. They want nature with Wi-Fi. They reject corporate culture while living 30 minutes away from Silicon Valley. And honestly, that tension is what makes this place fascinating. Because Santa Cruz isn't just a town, it's a performance of what Californians think freedom looks like. The first thing I noticed in the redwoods was how quiet Americans become, especially in a country that is usually very loud. And I realized redwood forests function almost like cathedrals in America. Because America is a relatively young country, we don't really have ancient castles everywhere. So instead, Americans treat nature like sacred architecture. And redwoods are probably the closest thing California has to a spiritual monument. You walk in and everybody suddenly starts acting like they enter a church. People stare upward silently. They place their hands against the bark like they are trying to absorb wisdom from the tree. Someone always says, "I feel so small." And honestly, that's kind of the point. These trees existed before modern nations' industrialization and electricity. And for a few minutes, people stop acting like the center of the universe. That emotion reset is probably why Californians are obsessed with nature spirituality. Not necessarily religion, spirituality. There's a difference. California spirituality is less God is watching over us, and more.
I need to stand barefoot near a tree and emotionally recalibrate.
And Santa Cruz is full of that energy. You'll see people who genuinely believe surfing is healing, forests are therapy, which sounds ridiculous until you've been trapped in Silicon Valley traffic for 2 hours. Then suddenly you also want to stare at a tree and reconsider your life choices. The interesting thing about Santa Cruz is that a status symbol here isn't traditional luxury. Nobody's trying too hard. Unlike places like Los Angeles, where status is polished and visible, Santa Cruz performs a different kind of wealth. The fantasy here is emotional freedom, flexibility, not caring and able to surf on weekdays. That's the beauty. And honestly, this might be the most Californian thing ever, making effort look effortless. You'll see someone standing barefoot outside a coffee shop looking spiritually liberated. Then find out they work remotely for a tech company making $400,000 a year. That contradiction is everywhere here. And that's not criticism, by the way, that's just modern California. Because California doesn't sell wealth directly anymore. It sells the appearance of freedom. The ultimate flex is no longer, "Look how rich I am." It's,
"Look how relaxed I am."
Now the second you leave the redwoods and enter the boardwalk, the energy changes immediately. Suddenly it's loud, sticky, chaotic, and overstimulating. And people weirdly love it because places like this are disappearing in America. The boardwalk feels like one of the last surviving spaces where strangers still experience chaos together. These rides force people to noise, crowds, and waiting. Children are crying over giant stuffed animals. It's chaos, but it's shared chaos. And honestly, there's something weirdly healthy about that. Nobody at the boardwalk is trying to become their best self. The strangest thing about Santa Cruz is how naturally it combines spirituality, consumerism, nostalgia, and escapism into one lifestyle. You can meditate in ancient forests, ride a roller coaster, eat funnel cake, all in one afternoon. And nobody sees the contradiction. Because California culture is incredibly good at blending opposing identities together. Luxury and anti-materialism, nature and commercialization, freedom and status. Santa Cruz isn't hiding those contradictions. It's displaying them openly. That's why it feels so fascinating. Because this town accidentally reveals what modern California really values. Not perfection, but the feeling of liberation. Even if it's partially curated. I think that's why people become emotionally attached to places like Santa Cruz, not because life there is perfect, but because it represents an idea that maybe life could feel slower, freer, softer, and less optimized, even if only temporarily. And maybe that's why people drive hours just to stand beneath giant trees or scream on old roller coasters by the ocean. Not because the experiences themselves are extraordinary, but because they briefly interrupt the exhausting performance of modern life. And honestly, that interruption might be the real luxury now. Do you feel the same way? Share it in your comments.